Solomon Northup woke up in Louisiana before sunrise. For a moment, lying on that dirt floor, he thought he was home. Then the bell rang. This was 1845. 4 years before this morning, he had a house in Saratoga Springs, New York. He had a wife, 3 kids, was a good fiddle player. People paid him to play at parties across the county. His wife Anne and their 3 kids were still waiting to hear if he was alive. 4 years had passed. He still hadn't found a way to send them a message. In the spring of 1841, 2 men offered him a short music job in Washington, D.C. He took it. They put something in his drink. When he woke up, he was on a stone floor with chains on his wrists. The building was 2 blocks from the United States Capitol. He was 33 years old, with no way to prove who he was. By 1845, he had been on Edwin Epps's cotton plantation in Louisiana for 3 years. He knew what to do every day. He knew the quotas, had learned which moods of Epps were okay and which ones meant trouble. He had also realized that getting through a day and really living through a day were not the thing. You have to get through a day before you can think about the next one. This didn't happen in some faraway place. On that morning, across every southern state, 4 million people woke up to that same bell. A system that started before sunrise and didn't stop until sunset, built to own not just for the people inside it, but every single hour they had. So what did a day actually look like? Many people don't realize that the day's activities continued even after dark. Going dark just meant the work changed shape. The bell rang in the early morning, between 3:30 and 4:30. In his memoir, 12 Years a Slave, published in 1853, Northup described what came next. If you weren't standing in the field by sunrise, you were whipped. Getting ready didn't take long because there was nothing to get ready with. On plantations like Epps, whole families shared a room with boards or a dirt floor to sleep on. Most mornings, breakfast was whatever was left from the night, if there was anything. Kids as young as 6 were already out there. They pulled weeds, hauled water, and watched the younger ones so their moms could stay in the fields. By 12, most were counted as workers, the same as any grown adult. Historian Dana Ramey Berry found that plantation records listed kids' work alongside adults, like age made little difference. When the sky started to get light, everyone was already out in the fields. On plantations, everyone worked together in the rows, all moving at the same pace the overseer set. If one person fell behind, they were beaten. That meant the slowest person in the row carried more than their burden, because everyone around them felt the pressure too. A cotton boll is rougher than most people imagine. When it opens, the shell splits into sharp points, and you move your hands fast through the plants, dragging a long sack behind you that gets heavier with every row. By mid-morning, it could weigh 60 or 70 pounds. Your hands bled from the edges of the bowls. Your feet were bare on ground that had been cracked open by months of summer heat. Northup said it took him weeks before his fingers stopped bleeding every day. Here's what nobody talks about. At the end of each day, every sack came to a scale. The weight was recorded against your name. If the number dropped below yesterday's number, the overseer noticed it. If it dropped twice, there were consequences. Northup laid out the math plainly in his memoir. If you pick 400 pounds today and 380 tomorrow, you would be beaten. Around midday, the work stopped for 30 minutes to an hour, and in the summer heat, sometimes 2 hours. It wasn't out of care. The people running these plantations knew that losing a worker to heat was more expensive than giving them a break. The food was cornmeal, salt pork, and sweet potatoes. Barry found that rations were calculated to keep people working, nothing beyond that. In picking season, the work didn't stop until it was too dark to see the bolls, and sometimes torches went up along the fields so it could go longer. Northup described harvest days that went until 9 or 10 at night. By the time the sack was weighed and he made the walk back to the cabin, he'd been on his feet for the better part of 18 hours. Then it gets darker, because the day still wasn't over. Women who had worked the day in the fields came back and cooked dinner, washed the clothes, and looked after the kids, and some were made to spin or weave on top of all that. Harriet Jacobs wrote that some women worked by the firelight until midnight and got up again before dawn. Men fixed tools, fed animals, handled whatever tasks the overseer had saved for after dark. Some people were sent to work for neighboring landowners at night. The person who owned them kept all the money. They received nothing, or sometimes a few cents. Then, sometime between 9 and 11 at night, the overseer stopped watching. That was the window. For Northup, that window was the fiddle. Northup had been playing the fiddle since he was a boy back in New York. Word of it spread on the Epps plantation, and eventually it reached Epps himself, who started hiring Northup out to neighboring properties for parties. It meant movement, faces, rooms outside the plantation. And somewhere in one of those rooms, one day, a face that might be willing to help him. He had been trying for years to get word to his family up in New York, and had nothing to show for it. He couldn't do it in the open, being caught with paper. A pen was enough reason for a man to be killed on the spot. He had to find somebody he could trust. In a place like that, trusting the wrong person didn't mean embarrassment or trouble. It meant death. He spent months watching a man named Armsby, a white day laborer who worked near the plantation, not rushing it, testing things slowly, like you do when a mistake is everything. When he finally trusted Armsby with a letter to mail north, Armsby took it straight to Epps. Northup stood in front of Epps, said it wasn't true. Epps chose to believe him. Only just that night, Northup burned what was left of that plan, lay in the dark. He kept showing up at the parties, kept playing the fiddle, and kept watching the faces in those rooms for anyone who looked like they might be a kind of person. The system wasn't built only to stop people from running. It was built to stop people from getting close to a chance to run. The kind of planning that happens when the fire is going down and the cabin is quiet. Northup spent every night in that cabin thinking about the problem. Enslaved people secretly met in the woods at night to talk freely. Frederick Douglass explained that the music they sang was not just for entertainment. Their songs carried secret messages, often serving as quiet prayers for freedom or secret signals about escaping. People sang these songs openly in the fields. The plantation could control every part of the day. It couldn't completely control what happened here. The system was designed to take everything. Kids were sold away from their parents. Marriages between enslaved people had no standing, which meant a family could be broken apart at any time for any reason. In southern states, teaching an enslaved person to read was a crime. Yet people taught each other anyway by firelight in the middle of the night at the risk of everything they had. In the fields during the day, they slowed down on purpose, broke tools, acted like they had misunderstood an instruction. Northup took things from Epps's stores from time to time, not because he needed them, but because taking something back, anything at all, felt like the only answer left. The body kept its record. Historians who looked at remains from plantation burial sites found spinal damage, worn down joints, and stress fractures that started when they were kids. People who lived this life died earlier than free people in the North. It wasn't violence that caused this. The schedule itself, with that food and no real rest, did its damage year after year. Northup spent 12 years on that plantation. In 1852, at a party for a neighboring property, he finally found the person he had been looking for. A Canadian carpenter named Samuel Bass was working on a building project nearby. Bass was the kind of person Northup had been hoping to find through all those years and parties. Northup gave him a letter. Bass mailed it north. In January 1853, a sheriff arrived at the Epps plantation with papers that said Northup was a man. He walked off that land. He was back in New York, had his story written down within months. He testified in court. He spent years trying to get his kidnappers in trouble, even though the law wasn't on his side. He kept trying. 4 million people heard that bell every morning for a long time. The law said they were property. Custom and tradition backed up the law. Violence kept it in place. And in the hours after the last overseer went to bed, 4 million people found ways to hold on to something that was their own. Children were given the names of grandparents who had been sold away. The name would survive even after the person couldn't.